Need to know. St. Nicholas. The 6th of December is the feast day for the Greek bishop who became the most iconic character in Western culture and adored by children the world over. Having gone through extraordinary reinvention and becoming a marketing superstar whilst being able to shed some fairly gruesome horror stories on the way.
Saint Nick, Father Christmas, Santa Claus, Kris Kringle, the ever-jolly fat dude that delivers presents to kids worldwide. There cannot be that much we don't know about his story.
Alright then, smart ass. Where does he come from?
Lapland? The North Pole, obviously.
No. He was born in a village called Patara in modern-day Turkey, what was Greece in the 3rd century. His dates are widely recognised as the 15th of March 270 to the 6th of December 343.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Well, he was the child of wealthy parents and raised a devout Christian before his parents died in an epidemic whilst he was still young.
Ah, he wasn't expecting that.
No. But he took his parents' teaching to heart, and following the instructions of Jesus to sell his property and give the money to the poor, he used his entire inheritance to assist the needy and the sick.
Crumbs. So he was a gift giver from a very early age.
Exactly. He dedicated his life to God and was made Bishop of Myra while still a young man. He became known far and wide for his generosity, love for children, and concern for sailors.
Love for children? Concern for sailors?
Careful now. He was exiled and imprisoned under Roman Emperor Diocletian, who persecuted Christians. The prisons were full of bishops, priests, and deacons, so much so that it was said there was no room to hold the murderers, thieves, and bandits.
Love for children, concern for sailors, spent time in prison.
I know what you're doing. With the accession of Constantine, he was released, and he is noted as one of the attendees at the First Council of Nicaea in 325.
So, as I understand it, to become a saint, someone needs to have performed some miracles.
Yes, there are several tales of St. Nicholas' generosity and miracles. Probably the most famous is the story of providing 3 bags of gold to an indebted man to cover the dowry of his daughters. This action is said to have saved the girls from a life of prostitution.
More gift-giving, then?
Yes, and the story goes that he threw the bags of gold through the window of the house over 3 nights. Christian devotional art of the Middle Ages frequently represents this act.
Easier than using a chimney.
Well, quite. He is also said to have rebuked a storm on a ship to the Holy Land. This miracle is seen as the reason he has been venerated as the patron saint of sailors.
Hang on a minute, I thought he was the patron saint of children.
Our mate St. Nick racked up multiple patronages, and if the stories are to be believed, he was quite an extraordinary fellow. He is said to have saved 3 innocent men from execution. He stepped up to force the executioner's sword to the floor, released their chains, and chastised a juror who had taken a bribe.
He sounds like a dude with stones.
The story has been blended in with other stories, including one which has him chastising 3 generals for allowing their soldiers to misbehave. These generals were then slandered, and St. Nicholas convinced the emperor to release them in a dream.
In a dream?
You said you wanted miracles.
We've heard these sort of tales before, though. What sets St. Nicholas apart from the other saints of his day?
Well, one of the most famous stories attributed to him has faded away, but was a beloved tale in the Middle Ages and the early modern era, which involves him resurrecting a trio of boys who had been murdered and dismembered by an innkeeper who planned to sell their bodies for meat during a famine.
I'm sorry, say what now? Pickled, dismembered children being sold for meat.
Yeah, apparently he sensed the crime and resurrected them. It is widely understood to be a late medieval period invention with no earlier source to confirm the story, but it leads to a fascinating development. You'll like this. It was so well loved that the story was depicted in stained glass, paintings, tapestries and frescoes. It became widely reproduced until the scene in the story of St. Nicholas standing over the children in a barrel became the most common image. As the story started to fade from memory, the image led to the understanding that St. Nicholas was the patron saint of children and, ready? Brewers.
Children in a barrel. It's so obvious.
Yeah, and having been a young bishop also led to the tradition in late medieval England of Yuletide boy bishops. You haven't got anything to say about that? Okay. This saw boys carry out the functions of priests. and instructing their elders. It was the connection to children and his generosity that leads to the transition to Father Christmas in the modern age.
Without the murderous butchery and beer.
Thankfully. In Greece and Italy, he has long been considered a favourite by sailors and fishermen and is the patron saint of several cities with harbours. In Greece, he can almost be considered a Christianised version of Poseidon, referred to as the Lord of the Sea. In fact, across Europe between the 1200s and 1500s, he was depicted like a Norse Odin or a Roman Saturn, as a white, bearded man with the powers of flight. He not only delivered gifts, but also ensured good behaviour, as kids were required to say their prayers and be good to ensure a reward.
Okay, so we've got the beard, check. We've got the gifts, check. We have flight, check. Things are starting to take shape.
Yeah. The next adaptation happens after the Protestant Reformation. The host of the saints fell out of favour, which left parents with a bit of a quandary. You love your kids, but who will bring them the gifts? Strangely, this role fell to baby Jesus. But due to his limited ability to carry gifts and not really having a fear factor to keep children in line, he was accompanied by a scary helper. It is this figure, albeit loosely based on St. Nicholas, that turns into the Santa figure. This is the era where the Krampus character comes from.
Krampus?
Yeah, scary Christmas punisher and kidnapper of children. We discussed him in our alternative Christmas flicks program.
What?
Yeah, the Christmas devil. You remember? Said to be the Norse god of hell. He would whip children and chain them and carry them away to the underworld. The character exists in a balance with the good St. Nicholas. Krampusnacht is celebrated in Central and Eastern Europe on the 5th of December, the night before the feast of St. Nicholas.
Great German accent, by the way. So back to the brutality towards children again.
Yeah, basically. I know. But it is the rediscovery of St. Nicholas that makes Christmas the modern, warm, family-driven goodwill holiday that we know today. Christmas had been rejected by many Christian communities, having become an alcohol-fueled, rowdy community blowout that resembled the pagan Saturnalia midwinter festival.
Alcohol-fueled, rowdy blowout. Yeah, that sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, I know. So, during the early 19th century, a series of poets and writers worked diligently to remodel Christmas as a family celebration, and the centrepiece of the project was St. Nicholas. Washington Irving's 1809 Knickerbocker's History of New York is the first portrayal of Nicholas flying in a wagon, smoking a pipe, and delivering presents to good children. By 1821, he has been stripped of all religious iconography and dressed in the shaggy furs of the Germanic gift-bringers of the early Protestant tradition. You can see how Santa Claus can emerge from the Dutch and German Santa Claus when spoken in a broad New Yorker accent, which I'm not going to do.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. I mean, we'll get letters, but okay. By 1822, we finally get A Visit from St. Nicholas from Clement Clark Moore, better known today as The Night Before Christmas.
Okay, so this is where the modern image is crafted.
Yeah. By the way, I was just going to tell the kids, you can listen to a recording of us doing The Night Before Christmas at the link in the description. Yeah. And no.
Okay.
He wrote it for his children, and he had no intention of adding to the Santa Claus cultural phenomenon. It was published anonymously the next year, and from there on in, Santa is a plump man riding a sleigh pulled by 8 tiny reindeer.
The dude in red is born.
Well, not quite. It wasn't until the late 19th century that full-sized adult dressed in red fur and white trim, based in the North Pole, is all tied down. The poem had left a degree of interpretation, and there are many examples of St. Nicholas being depicted in wildly different ways until then, including imagery of him looking like George Washington riding a broomstick.
A broomstick? I wasn't expecting that.
It comes down to political cartoonist Thomas Nast to provide us with the first imagery of Santa Claus as a grandfatherly jolly man in a red suit. This was in a cartoon of Santa bringing gifts to the Civil War troops. It is suspected that he called upon the description of St. Nicholas blended with the propaganda iconography of Uncle Sam.
So this was all happening in America, right?
Yeah, And once the Kris Kringle-style Germanic gift-bringer had been repackaged in the New World, the character underwent a strange reverse migration to Europe. Replacing the Krampus scary gift-bringers, effectively, he tamed the Brothers Grimm scary fairy tale characters that were his ancestors and rapidly replaced them.
Hang on, so Coca-Cola did not invent Santa?
No, they built on the successful imagery that came a full 40 years before they even existed.
Oh, finally. So there we are. The journey is complete.
No, there are more challenges that Santa has to face.
What could possibly challenge Santa now?
Communism.
Oh. Free gifts for all from the magic grandpa? Sounds delightfully socialist.
You will get complaints. No, Stalin made a concerted effort to abolish Christmas.
Like the Sheriff of Nottingham?
Exactly. The celebration of Christmas was cancelled along with all the traditions of the gift bringers. Yet, in the 1930s, Stalin needed to garner support, so he authorised the return of the gift bringer as Grandfather Frost, as a New Year gift bringer, and dressed in blue furs to avoid confusion with the Western capitalist pig dog Santa.
And you tell me off. Bet he was right miffed, though. Missed out on the red suit.
Agreed. The communists imposed Grandfather Frost on Eastern European culture in the Cold War era, but locals in general turned their nose up at the efforts and openly returned to their original cultural traditions post-1989.
So Santa was part of a culture war?
Yes, and he is still heavily political. Santa often marches arm in arm with the US military, especially after World War II, in which he was a welcome symbol of US generosity.
And long may his reign continue.
Well, Santa is under fire in many cultures now, as he either represents a secular celebration of Christmas rather than religious, or because he is not local. The Czech Republic, the Netherlands, Austria and Latin America all have strong anti-Santa movements in an effort to preserve their native traditions.
My goodness. Maybe that's something for the Spanish to consider. After all, they have the Three Kings tradition as the gift bringers.
Yeah, and you can learn all about that at the link in the description. But it would make my Christmas bill significantly cheaper if I didn't have to deal with the Three Kings. Hey?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it would be an act of generosity to St. Nicholas to reduce his intense one-night global tour responsibilities.
Well, absolutely. Maybe he can return to his roots of brewing beer for sailors and pickling kids.
Oh, for the love of... Oh. Look, wait. We could look into the fascinating story of his relics and what happened to his body after his death.
Or...
I could show you this hilarious meme which suggests St. Nicholas was a Klingon.
Oh, a Klingon meme, please.
There you go.
His head looks like a Snickers.